The term fast fashion used to have a very specific meaning. It referred to the ultra-cheap, low-quality clothing typically associated with retailers like Forever 21, H&M, Zara, and Shein. You know, the stores where you could buy a t-shirt for like $4 or a pair of jeans for $10. If you shopped there, you knew that whatever you were buying would be shitty. You knew that it was probably made in a sweatshop overseas, and you knew that it likely wouldn't last very long. But it was like $4, so what did you care? Fast fashion pioneered the art of instant gratification. It made trendy clothes accessible to everyone and anyone, regardless of their budget. And with that, the need to shop with intention, to consider whether or not you actually needed or even wanted the piece before you bought it, and whether you'd get enough use out of it to justify the cost, well, that went out the window. But over the last few decades, fast fashion has evolved from being a very niche pocket of the fashion industry to being the entire fashion industry. No longer is price a determining factor of quality because nearly every brand, from ultra budget to mall brands all the way up to luxury fashion, has become fast fashion. You'd be hard pressed to find a single store in any mall that sells something that isn't fast fashion. Fast fashion, fast fashion, fast fashion, fast fashion again. That's fast fashion too. Whether you're spending $20 or $2,000 on a piece, chances are that you're getting something that's thinly constructed, poorly stitched, made of synthetic materials, and unlikely to last more than a season, because it was never meant to, regardless of what it cost you. But it wasn't always this way, so what happened? Before we can get too deep into how this happened, first, I think it's important to truly define what fast fashion is, because a lot of people have misunderstood it for a long time now, myself very much included. When I hear the term fast fashion, there are usually a few things that come to mind. Clothing that's made overseas in factories with unethical working conditions, clothing that's made of polyester or some other type of plastic material, and of course, clothing that's dirt cheap. But none of this is exactly accurate. I mean, those things are often also true, but that's not really what fast fashion means. The term fast fashion was first popularized in the 90s. Prior to then, clothing retailers usually unveiled new styles about twice a year. There'd be the spring-summer collection and the fall-winter collection. And for the most part, that was it. When the new styles were launched, people would flock to the stores to start picking out their new wardrobe pieces for the coming season, and then they would be mostly good to go for the next 6 months or so. Like, I remember when I was young, I'd generally get a few new things for back-to-school season in September, and then maybe some summer stuff in June when school was over, and that was it. And that was pretty normal. But then, retailers had this brilliant idea. What if instead of waiting 6 months to bring in new styles, you could just do it constantly, all year long? The only problem was that making garments takes time. It takes time to come up with the designs and make the patterns. It takes time for things like cotton and linen to grow. It takes time to manufacture the pieces, and it takes time to ship them to the stores and then market and sell them to customers. Usually, this was a many months long process, but if companies could find ways to speed it up significantly, they could have a never-ending stream of new designs for sale year-round and make way more money. So they did. They started by ripping off designs from other companies and making them with synthetic materials that are faster to make and cheaper to source. And of course, the cutting and sewing process had to speed up too, which is where offshore manufacturing and sweatshops came into the picture. When employees are allowed to work reasonable hours at a reasonable pace and to take lunch breaks and have days off, well, that throws a wrench in the gears of the productivity machine. So if you move your manufacturing to countries where workers have basically no rights and are paid pennies per hour, you can get things done really fast and really cheap. And then you can get those pieces on the sales floor really fast. Zara, for example, claims that they can take a piece from the design concept to the sales floor in just 2 to 3 weeks. That's absurd. And then naturally, when stores have such an enormous quantity of new merchandise coming in all the time, they have to move things quickly to make space. So it's not uncommon for a style to only be available for a week or two before it's discontinued and disposed of to make room for the next batch of inventory. This leads to a ton of waste, and on the consumer side, it leads to a massive increase in impulse shopping, because if you see something you like, you better snap it up right now while you can. There are no promises that it will still be available in a few days from now. So fast fashion refers specifically to the speed in which garments are made and sold, and then discontinued and disposed of, both by stores making room for new inventory and by consumers donating them or throwing them away after just a few wears. Either because they've already started to fall apart, or just because they're tired of them and want to make room for their next shopping spree, which is really easy to do when everything is so cheap and meaningless And all of that is to say that while not everything comprised of polyester or made overseas is necessarily fast fashion, and not all fast fashion is necessarily made of polyester, those attributes often do go hand in hand with the fast fashion business model. But as I said, fast fashion didn't always consume the entire market. Back in the day, popular mall brands like Levi's, Gap, J.Crew, and LL Bean used to make quality products at a reasonably accessible price point. I mean, maybe not the price point that would allow the average person to own, say, 50 sweaters, but the average person never intended to own 50 sweaters. Any of these stores would have been a perfectly good place to find basics like t-shirts, jeans, sweaters, and jackets made of 100% cotton or other quality materials, and often manufactured in the US or Europe. You'd buy a few pieces every year as you needed to, and they'd last as long as you wanted them to. Like as a kid, I had Gap sweatshirts that I literally wore for years and years, and they still looked brand new. And do you remember when hand-me-downs were a thing? Like kids would wear a piece of clothing until it no longer fit, and then they'd pass it on to a younger sibling or a cousin or a friend who would also get a bunch of wear out of it and then pass it on again. Things never really seemed to wear out, but that's just not the case anymore. And with such cheap options available in fast fashion stores, there's rarely even a need for hand-me-downs anymore. I continued shopping at the Gap into my early 20s, and I found that nearly every time I bought something, it would shrink really badly or stretch out of shape all weirdly after just like 1 or 2 washes and be completely unwearable. And after going through this about 10 times, I just gave up shopping there. Bit of a funny story, but after that happened, I got really frustrated and I emailed their customer service being like, yo, like what the hell is going on? I have hundreds of dollars worth of your clothes here and they're all trash. I can't wear any of them. And well, in response to that, they generously sent me a $20 gift card so I could buy more of their garbage clothing, I guess. Thanks, I think. Anyways, there were of course always the more expensive designer brands as well. Brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, Guess, Diesel, etc. With these guys, you were definitely mostly paying for a logo, but they'd still be good quality, and they'd still wash and wear well and last for years. But those times are long gone now, because today it doesn't matter what brand you're buying or how much you're paying. That $250 Ralph Lauren sweater is still made overseas, and it's still made of a blend of plastic materials, no different than that $30 sweater from Forever 21. So what's even the point? And how did we get here? We're about to dive deep into the crazy and exploitative world of fast fashion, but trust me when I say that the clothing industry is far from the only one that's out to screw you over and rip you off. In fact, data brokers may just take the cake in that category. Data brokers are these companies who make a killing collecting and selling your personal information, like your name, address, and phone number, where you work, your relatives' names, even really sensitive stuff like your legal and medical history and how you vote. And they post it all over those sketchy people search sites, making it available to literally anyone who has a credit card. This puts you at risk for things like identity theft, scams, phishing attempts, harassment, and doxing. And believe it or not, data brokers are completely legal. I mean, technically, they're required to delete your information when you ask them to, but of course, they make it really difficult for you to do that. That's why I've been personally using today's sponsor, Delete Me, for well over a year now to help protect my privacy online. Delete Me is a hands-free service that goes to work for you, removing your personal information from hundreds of data broker and people search sites. Then they send you a quarterly report showing you everything they found and removed. And because they use their own tech to do this, rather than outsourcing to a third party, your data stays completely safe. For this reason and more, Delete Me was named the #1 data removal service by Wirecutter. Head over to joindeleteme.com/Nicole or scan this QR code and use the code Nicole to get 20% off. The rise of fast fashion brands shifted the consumer landscape in a major way. With the endless cycle of new styles available for dirt cheap prices, it became common for everyday people to be constantly shopping and accumulating massive wardrobes. It reprogrammed our brains to be excited about the novelty of a new purchase more than the purchase itself. Like, a sweater is just a sweater, but the act of going shopping and getting something new is fun, regardless of what that new thing is, even if you're just shopping online. It stopped being about clothes, and instead just became about the dopamine hit, which is why we now see people with closets packed full of brand new clothing with the tag still on, who still continue to shop for more, because they never really cared to wear the stuff. They just wanted to buy it. And that exact phenomenon is now so widespread that it's common for people to find parcels on their doorstep that they have no memory of ordering. Like, they don't even know what's in the box until they open it. So with that, shitty quality fast fashion has become the norm in the last few decades. So much so that it has changed our expectations of what clothing is supposed to look like and feel like. It's changed our expectations of how long a garment is supposed to last, and higher end brands started to take notice of the shift. More and more, people began prioritizing quantity over quality. After all, the average garment is now only worn 7 to 10 times before being discarded, so why would durability even matter? When people did opt for a certain brand name, it was no longer because they appreciated the quality. They just liked it as a status symbol. And so, in a climate where people have these skewed expectations of quality and really only care about flexing logos, brands quickly realized that they could start cutting corners in their productions and most people wouldn't care. And unfortunately, they were right. For brands, this meant increasing their profit margins significantly on each piece. For the consumer, this meant getting significantly less value for their money. But the majority never noticed or cared. Another big part of this which can't be ignored is the fact that a large percentage of shopping now happens online rather than in-store. This means that people are mostly shopping blindly without the ability to inspect a garment for quality before buying it. It's only once it's delivered that you realize how thin and cheap it is. And sure, you could return it, and you should return it, but most people don't. But with all of that said, there is another side to the story as well. I talked about this in a video I made last year called The Shitification of Everything, but there's more than one way that consumers' expectations have led to the degradation of quality, not just in clothing, but really in all things. Beyond companies just taking advantage of the fact that consumers have lost appreciation for craftsmanship, there's also an extent to which cutting corners becomes necessary to meet consumers' unrealistic expectations of low prices. Expectations which, again, have been largely set by the fast fashion industry skewing our perception of what things are supposed to cost. I mean, obviously, everything becomes more expensive over time, right? This is true for goods and for services, including labor. But despite this being common sense, our brains often have a hard time accounting for it. So for example, if you went out today and you bought a pair of Nike sneakers for $100, you would subconsciously lock onto the idea of Nikes costing $100. But if in 2 or 3 years from now you went to buy another pair and found that they were now $150, you'd probably be pissed. But think about it. If materials are becoming more expensive, and labor is becoming more expensive, and let's not even get into that whole tariff mess, then really the only way that Nike can continue to meet their customers' expectations, their customers' demands of the shoes costing no more than $100 is to make them shittier. So they do. Fast fashion has set the stage for a race to the bottom, with new brands constantly popping up and finding ways to undercut their competition, because the majority of consumers today only look at the price tag and don't care about anything else. The cheaper something is, the more they can buy, and that's all they care about. And we can't miss talking about the role that social media has played in all of this. Social media has taken the concept of a microtrend and put it on steroids. There used to be this idea of an investment piece, an expensive piece of clothing or maybe an accessory that you'd buy knowing that it was timeless and it would last for decades. But social media has largely killed the concept of anything being timeless because now everything is just an aesthetic, and those aesthetics change more often than your underwear. In the last year or two alone, I've heard of clean girl, mob wife, stealth wealth, granola girl, indie sleaze. I don't know, dude. I just turned 33. I don't consider myself old. I definitely don't feel old most days, but I honestly don't know what any of those words mean. My point is that with trends evolving as fast as they do, it's almost like every piece of clothing is just a Halloween costume nowadays. Like, you're only going to wear it once or twice, so you might as well get it for as cheap as possible. And of course, there's also an entire genre of content creation dedicated to showing off massive shopping hauls, which really only serves to further normalize shopping habits that are anything but normal. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the result of this has been disastrous in pretty much every way. Globally, there was 120 million metric tons of textile waste created in 2024, and 80% of it ended up either in the landfill or being incinerated. Only about 1% of all clothing produced gets recycled into new garments because with so many pieces now being made of a mixture of different synthetics, it's very difficult to separate out all those materials and reuse them. And straight up, charities and thrift stores don't want your garbage clothes. They're already drowning in more of it than they could possibly know what to do with. And a shirt that only costs $7 to begin with has zero resale value. So no, you're not doing a good thing when you donate your crap clothing. You're just forcing someone else to throw away your trash for you. The average American buys 68 new pieces of clothing every single year. That's more than one new thing every single week at a cost of about $1,500 a year. And with each piece only being worn about 7 times before it's thrown out, that equates to 81 pounds of clothing being thrown out per person every year. or rather $1,500 a year being flushed down the toilet. It's truly an astronomical waste in every capacity. But then all of that begs the question, what do we do? Like, obviously we all need to wear something. Well, most of us. I was driving behind this car the other day, and they had a bumper sticker from the local nudist park that said, "Life is better without tan lines." I rolled up beside them, and they were like 80 years old, so good for them, I guess. But as for the rest of us, if shitty fast fashion brands sell shitty fast fashion, and formerly respectable heritage brands sell shitty fast fashion, and expensive designer brands sell shitty fast fashion, what the hell do we do? I'm gonna try to offer a couple solutions here with hopes that I'll have a little something for everyone. The ideal solution would be to seek out and invest in slow fashion. The slow fashion movement is alive and well, and as the name suggests, it is the antithesis to fast fashion. Usually, slow fashion brands make expertly crafted clothing pieces in small batches using high-quality, sustainable materials. They'll generally be made in countries with fair labor standards, and they tend to focus more on timeless designs instead of just fleeting trends. When you buy slow fashion, you're generally getting far more bang for your buck based on the actual cost of making the piece compared to what you're paying for it. Like, the markup on it is much less than it is on shitty fast fashion. And of course, there's also the fact that it should last way longer than a piece of shit from Old Navy. But of course, this often comes with a steep price tag. When buying slow fashion, the key is to consider the cost per wear, and even more importantly, to focus on buying less but better. Like, owning 2 sweaters that each cost $300 but that you love and that will last a lifetime is an infinitely better deal than owning 20 polyester sweaters that cost $30 each but that you'll toss after only a few wears at best. Of course, this doesn't work if you're obsessed with following TikTok trends and micro aesthetics, but if you are, I would suggest that you grow up. And I mean that in the most disrespectful way possible. That said, if spending several $100s on a single piece of clothing just isn't possible for you, no worries, I feel you. I have found that there are different degrees of fast fashion, different levels of shit, if you will. Personally, I would try to steer entirely clear of the really cheap stuff. Again, the Zara, Forever 21, H&M, Temu, Shein, Urban Planet, I'm sure there's a bunch more I'm missing. But even amongst the mall brands, I do find that there's a wide spectrum of quality. Like, honestly, as much as I think that most of the stuff nowadays at the Gap is trash, their 1969 denim is decent. They even have some styles that are 100% cotton. I've been wearing these tops from Uniqlo now for a while, which is a fast fashion brand, but they're reasonably priced and I think they fit well, and honestly, the quality isn't that bad. Basically, just try to look for pieces that are made of actual cotton or linen or whatever instead of spandex and lycra and polyester. Check the seams for shoddy stitching or loose threads because if it's already coming apart in the store, there's no hope for it once you get it home. Also, be mindful of how you wash and care for each piece. I know this should be like common sense, but most of us don't do this. Follow the instructions that are on the tag. Like, they're there for a reason, and they will tell you how to take care of that item and make it last longer. Definitely try to avoid using fabric softener and maybe even skip the dryer if you can. That stuff tends to ruin your clothes. And even if the cheapest of the cheap is truly all you can afford, the way you take care of your things will have a massive impact on how long they last. Buy things that you genuinely like and plan to wear as much as possible. If you can foresee yourself getting rid of something after just a few wears, that's probably a sign you shouldn't buy it. I feel like I also have to mention shopping secondhand, but I'll be honest and admit that I personally don't shop secondhand when it comes to clothes. It kind of just icks me out. I'm sure I'll get some hate for that. I'm just being honest, but if you're comfortable with it, it's probably the best way to find higher quality pieces at more affordable prices. Unfollow the influencers who make you feel like what you have isn't good enough. And honestly, just spend less time on your phone overall. Trust me when I say that your brain will thank you. In general, just try to keep in mind that you probably don't actually need more clothing right now. You probably have more than enough stuff in your closet. When you find yourself browsing, ask yourself if it's because you genuinely need something new or if you're just bored. I'd bet it's the latter. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys in this one. As always, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know if you've also noticed this gradual degradation in quality in any specific brands you used to enjoy. And maybe even more so than that, the opposite. If you have found any clothing brands that you think are doing a good thing, that are making a good quality product at a fair price, drop them in the comment section because I'm sure that I'm not the only one who would love to know what they are. If you like this video, like the video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. Don't forget to check out Delete Me at the link in the description box down below or scan this QR code and use the code Nicole for 20% off. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.